The challenge coin hit the steel table with a sharp crack that silenced 40 people across the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center. Derek Hayes straightened to his full 6'3" height, contempt radiating from every inch as he stared at the woman 20 feet away. "They sent us a soccer mom." The words carried across Camp Pendleton's morning air like a thrown weapon designed to wound. Laughter exploded behind him, raw, cruel, the kind that strips dignity layer by layer. Blake Morrison planted his boots' wide arms folded across his chest in a posture of judgment. Flynn Cooper's smirk cut sharp as broken glass. Jasper Torres elbowed the man beside him, both struggling to contain their amusement. Even Raven Marshall, the only female among these SEAL candidates, released a bitter exhale that sounded like endorsement rather than sympathy. 20 feet away, Hazel Parker didn't react. The 40-year-old woman continued adjusting downrange targets with movements so deliberate they seemed choreographed. Her flannel shirt hung loose over a frame that stood 5'4" on generous days. Faded jeans that had seen better decades. Brown hair pulled into a ponytail that suggested function over fashion. No cosmetics, no military bearing, no hint of anything beyond someone's mother filling in at a shooting range on a Wednesday morning. "Ma'am," Blake's voice dripped false courtesy as he separated from the group. "With all due respect, we're qualifying for the SEAL sniper program. We need someone who actually knows what they're doing, not—" His pause stretched deliberately as his gaze traveled from her scuffed boots to her weathered face. Someone's mom playing instructor. Flynn's contribution came louder, theatrical. "Where's Gunny Matthews? Someone tell me where the actual instructor went." Stroke. 0400 this morning. Hazel's response emerged quiet, conversational, as though discussing weather patterns instead of medical emergencies. "I'm your replacement." 3 heartbeats of silence shattered as Jasper Torres broke into open laughter. "Oh man, this week's gonna drag forever." Raven Marshall glanced at Hazel, then away fast, as if eye contact might contaminate her, might associate her with this woman who represented everything she'd fought to distance herself from. Derek moved closer, using his height like a weapon, his shadow swallowing the space between them. "Look, lady, nothing personal here, but this is SEAL training, elite preparation. We can't waste time with someone who— 0800 hours, briefing room, 10 minutes. Hazel pivoted and walked toward the equipment shed. Without waiting for acknowledgement, her stride neither rushed nor hesitant. "Did she seriously just—" Blake started. "She did." Derek retrieved his challenge coin jaw, working like he was chewing steel. "Fine. 10 minutes. Then we file formal complaints and get a real instructor." None of them understood. Not one suspected that the silent woman in worn flannel carried the most dangerous secret in modern American sniper warfare. Within 90 minutes, every assumption they had built about combat respect and the true meaning of deadly precision would detonate like ordnance dropped from altitude. Morning sun climbed the California mountains as 6 SEAL candidates made their way to the briefing room. Their boots hammered the corridor in a rhythm designed to announce displeasure. Inside, Hazel had already prepared laptop, connected to a projector displaying basic safety protocols. She stood front and center, hands clasped, waiting. They arrived 5 minutes late. On purpose. No apologies followed their entrance. Derek claimed a seat with boots propped on the chair, a head arms crossed in a posture of aggressive boredom. Blake settled near the back phone, already glowing in his palm. Flynn stretched ostentatiously, manufacturing a yawn that could have registered on seismographs. Jasper whispered something that triggered quiet laughter. Raven sat apart, but wore identical dismissiveness like uniform insignia. "Good morning." Hazel's voice maintained professional neutrality. She advanced the slide showing course requirements. Advanced sniper qualification spans 6 weeks. Testing covers. Blake's phone chirped. He didn't silence it. Didn't even glance up from whatever held his attention. Hazel paused exactly 2 seconds before continuing. Precision shooting from 400 to 1,500 yards. Environmental calculations, moving target engagement, and tactical decision-making under pressure. Flynn leaned toward Derek, volume calibrated to carry. "Soccer mom's teaching us tactics. This is comedy gold." Derek's mouth twitched approval. Hazel's expression remained unchanged. She clicked to the next slide, ballistic calculations involving wine drift Coriolis effect, bullet drop compensation, complex mathematics that separated competent shooters from elite operators. For 1,200-yard engagement with 15-mile-per-hour crosswind, you'll need to account for... She stopped focusing directly on Blake, who remained absorbed by his phone. Mr. Morrison, perhaps you'd like to calculate the drift. Blake looked up, feigning surprise that could have won theater awards. Oh, sorry. Were you talking to me? His tone broadcast that sorry was the furthest thing from his actual sentiment. The formulas displayed on screen. Right. He made a production of squinting at the projection. Google much? The room erupted with suppressed laughter. Even Raven smiled. Hazel allowed the moment to settle like sediment in still water before speaking again, her voice acquiring a precision that hadn't been present before. Wind drift at 1,200 yards equals velocity, times time of flight, times wind, speed times cosine of wind, angle divided by 12. She recited without consulting notes, without hesitation. Numbers flowing like rehearsed poetry. For 762mm NATO, round at 2,800 feet per second, 15 mile per hour, full value wind, approximately 21.4 inches. Silence fell like a curtain dropping. Blake's smirk evaporated. His fingers moved across his phone, checking calculations. His face carefully neutralized. Jasper leaned forward slightly. Derek's boots came off the forward chair. Hazel continued as though nothing significant had occurred, advancing to the next slide. But atmospheric pressure had shifted in that room, subtle as smoke, impossible to ignore. The briefing consumed another 20 minutes. Hazel outlined daily schedules, weapon systems qualification standards. She maintained that same quiet, steady tone throughout. The candidates listened now, though their body language still broadcast skepticism like radio signals. When she concluded, Derek raised his hand. Ma'am, with all due respect. That phrase again weaponized by intonation into something meaning its opposite. Can we request an instructor with actual field experience, someone who's been downrange? That's above my authority, Hazel replied simply. Colonel Webb handles personnel decisions. Maybe we'll have that conversation. Briefing room doors behind you. She began unpacking equipment from a case, effectively dismissing them. They filed out, voices rising the moment hallway distance provided cover. Only Dr. Naomi Cross remained. The range manager had slipped in during the session, standing quietly at the back. Now she approached with concern etched across her features. You don't have to tolerate this, Naomi said softly. I can speak to Webb, document their insubordination. Hazel shook her head, still focused on equipment. They're testing boundaries, standard operator behavior. That doesn't make it acceptable. No. Hazel finally looked up, and something in her eyes made Naomi's prepared arguments die unspoken. But it makes it familiar. If you're already hooked by the disrespect Hazel is facing, hit that like button right now. Because what these cocky seals are about to discover will blow your mind. This woman they're mocking. She's hiding something that will make every single one of them wish they could take back every word. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when her true identity gets exposed. The reveal is absolutely insane. Stay locked in, because this story is about to take a turn nobody sees coming. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. You'll want to catch every single video like this. By 1,000 hours, they'd relocated to outdoor range facilities. California sun hammered down on shooting stations arranged in precise formation, each equipped with sandbag rests and spotting scopes. Downrange targets stood at various distances marked by weathered posts that had seen years of service. Hazel assigned stations and began weapon inspections. She moved systematically, examining each rifle with practiced efficiency that suggested thousands of repetitions. When she reached Flynn's position, he stood with arms crossed, physically blocking her access. Excuse me, she said quietly. Flynn shifted minimally, a movement that forced her to squeeze past. As she did, he moved again, a bump that would appear accidental to casual observers. Hazel's hand shot out, catching his wrist amid motion, with a grip that stopped him completely. The contact lasted under a second before she released him and continued her inspection. Flynn stared at his wrist, rubbing it slowly. That grab had been fast, precise, carried strength that didn't match her size or appearance. He glanced at Derek, who'd been watching. Derek's eyes narrowed fractionally. Morning drills were straightforward 50 rounds at 300 yards, demonstrating basic competency. Blake went first, taking deliberate time, setting up. His shooting stance was intentionally sloppy. Shoulder pulled back, elbow elevated wrong. He fired 5 rounds. 3 found the target, 2 went wide. Hazel observed from 10 feet back, making notes on a clipboard. She didn't speak. "No feedback, ma'am," Derek called from 2 stations over. "Thought that was the job description." Hazel walked to Blake's station, set down her clipboard, made a single adjustment, rotating his rifle 2 degrees left on the sandbag rest. She stepped back without commentary. Blake fired again. The round punched dead center. His eyebrows climbed. He examined the rifle, then glanced at Hazel, who'd already moved on to observe Jasper. Blake fired 4 more rounds, all center mass. From the observation tower, Sergeant Levi Stone watched through binoculars. The young veteran had logged 2 tours in Afghanistan and recognized expertise when he saw it. That adjustment Hazel made wasn't guesswork. It was knowledge compressed into a 2-degree rotation. Hugo Grant, the weapons maintenance specialist, approached Hazel as she moved between stations. Without being asked, he handed her an adjustment tool she'd need for the next rifle check. She nodded thanks, and something passed between them, understanding that required no verbalization. Raven was shooting now, form textbook perfect. She didn't need correction, and Hazel gave none, simply marking her clipboard. But when their eyes met briefly, Raven looked away first, as if acknowledging Hazel might compromise her standing with the team. Noon brought lunch break. The 6 SEAL candidates clustered at a table on the far side of the outdoor eating area, maximum distance from Hazel without leaving the grounds. Their voices carried in fragments. "Something's not right about her," Flynn was saying. "She's civilian," Derek replied. "Probably learned everything from YouTube tutorials." "That calculation, though," Blake interjected. "She didn't even pause. And the rifle adjustment that wasn't lucky guessing." "Doesn't matter," Derek's voice hardened. "We need real training, not amateur hour from someone's mother." Hazel sat alone at a picnic table eating a sandwich she'd brought from home. Ivy Brooks, the administrative staff member, who'd worked at the range for 15 years, approached with a thermos of coffee. "Brought your usual," Ivy said, her maternal warmth cutting through tension like sunlight through storm clouds. "Figured you might need it today." "Thanks, Ivy." "Those boys giving you trouble?" "They're doing what they're trained to do." Ivy settled onto the bench across from her. "Hazel Honey being trained to test authority doesn't mean you have to accept disrespect." "I'm not accepting it." Hazel's voice carried quiet certainty. "I'm letting them reveal who they are." Before Ivy could respond, Derek's shadow fell across their table. He stood at the end challenge coin, spinning between his fingers, a nervous habit that betrayed the confidence in his voice. "Look, this isn't working," he said. "We need real instruction. You're clearly trying, but we're preparing for actual combat situations." Hazel looked up with eyes that held something he couldn't quite identify. "You received real instruction. Mr. Morrison's grouping improved 40% after correction." "Lucky guess. Anyone can adjust a rifle." "Then perhaps you don't need instruction at all." Derek's jaw tightened. The coin stopped spinning. "Don't patronize me." "I'm not." Hazel stood gathering her trash. "I'm suggesting that if you believe instruction is merely guesswork, you've already decided I can't teach you anything. So, why waste your time staying?" She walked away before he could marshal his prepared arguments, leaving Derek standing with responses dying in his throat. Ivy watched him struggle, then spoke softly. "That woman has forgotten more about shooting than you'll learn in a lifetime, son. I'd suggest paying attention." Derek turned to look at her. "You know her story? I know she's earned the right to silence." Ivy stood and walked away, leaving Derek more unsettled than any confrontation could have managed. Afternoon session focused on advanced ballistics theory. Inside the climate-controlled classroom, Hazel stood at a whiteboard, marker in hand. She drew a trajectory curve, then began adding variables: temperature, humidity, altitude, Coriolis effect. The candidates entered and took seats, their earlier mockery tempered slightly by morning demonstrations, but not extinguished. Blake sat in front, and this time, laptop open, clearly prepared to fact-check everything she said. "The Coriolis effect." Hazel began writing the formula on the board. "Causes bullet drift due to Earth's rotation. At long range, failing to account for it means missing your target entirely." Blake's hand shot up. "That formula, I've seen it before. That's classified SOCOM material. How does a civilian contractor have access to that?" Hazel turned from the board. "It's open source physics applied correctly. Prove it. Blake leaned back, arms crossed. Calculate trajectory for 1,200 yards, 15 mile per hour. Crosswind 45-degree angle moving target at 8 miles per hour. The room went silent. Even Derek looked interested now, leaning forward slightly. This was expert-level calculation that normally required several minutes with ballistic computers. Hazel picked up the marker and began writing. Her hand moved across the whiteboard in smooth, continuous strokes. Numbers flowing into equations, variables canceling solutions, appearing as if she were simply transcribing something already complete in her mind. 30 seconds later, she set down the marker. The answer stared back at them: elevation, adjustment, windage, compensation. Lee's time for moving target all calculated to 2 decimal places. Blake's fingers flew across his laptop, entering identical variables into ballistic software. His typing slowed, then stopped, his face drained of color. That's exact, down to the decimal point. Flynn leaned over to verify the screen. How did you? She had to have pre-calculated it, Jasper said, but his voice lacked conviction. Nobody does that in their head. Maybe. Derek's eyes hadn't left Hazel. Or maybe we're missing something crucial. The classroom door opened and Lieutenant Commander Dylan Shaw entered khaki uniforms crisp, despite afternoon heat. Shaw was a SEAL instructor with 20 years' experience respected across the special operations community. He moved to the back and stood quietly observing. Hazel acknowledged him with a brief nod and continued the lesson. But senior authorities' presence changed dynamics. The candidates sat straighter. Phones stayed in pockets. For the next hour, Hazel guided them through increasingly complex scenarios. Each time someone challenged her, and they did repeatedly, she provided answers that were precise, immediate, verifiable. Blake's laptop became referee, confirming every calculation she made. By 1600 hours, when session ended, confusion had replaced mockery. They filed out in silence, processing what they had witnessed. Shaw remained behind, approaching Hazel as she erased the whiteboard. "Impressive teaching," he said. "Where'd you train various places?" Hazel's tone was pleasant but revealed nothing. "You have the cadence of someone who's briefed operators before." "I've been around the military a long time, sir." Shaw studied her for a long moment, clearly wanting to push further, but something in her polite deflection made him nod instead. "Carry on, Instructor Parker." After he left, Hazel stood alone in the empty classroom. Her hands, which had been steady throughout the day, trembled slightly as she gathered materials. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath. 4 counts in 4 counts, hold 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. The trembling stopped. Outside the classroom, hidden from view, Master Chief Silas Garrett stood in the hallway. The 55-year-old veteran had been passing by when that breathing pattern caught his attention. He knew that rhythm. He'd heard it described before, years ago, in a briefing about a classified program that officially didn't exist. His mind worked through possibilities as he walked away, pieces of a puzzle beginning to align. Speaking of precision and accuracy, let's talk about technology that actually matters. In high-stakes situations like military operations, having reliable communication devices can mean the difference between life and death. Modern encrypted satellite phones and tactical communication systems have come a long way from the equipment used a decade ago. These devices now feature military-grade encryption GPS tracking and can operate in extreme conditions from desert heat to Arctic cold. For professionals who need absolute reliability, whether in security emergency response or remote field work, investing in top-tier communication technology isn't optional. It's essential for mission success and personal safety. The next morning arrived with fog rolling off the Pacific, transforming the range into a gray landscape where targets appeared as shadows. Thursday's schedule called for practical examinations, field stripping, and reassembling weapons under pressure. 6 candidates gathered around a table where an M110 sniper rifle lay disassembled into component parts. Derek cracked his knuckles, confidence restored after a night's sleep and distance from yesterday's unsettling demonstrations. "Standard drill," Hazel announced. "Field strip and reassemble blindfolded for time. This tests your familiarity with weapons systems and your ability to maintain them in zero visibility conditions." "Ladies first," Flynn said with a grin, then catching himself. "Oh wait, we meant you, ma'am. Why don't you demonstrate?" The others laughed, but it sounded more nervous than mocking. Something had shifted since yesterday. Derek volunteered first. He tied the blindfold securely and began working. His hands moved with practiced confidence, disassembling the rifle into major components: barrel bolt, assembly, trigger, group, stock. Reassembly was slower, requiring tactile memory to align each piece correctly. When he finished and removed the blindfold, he checked the timer. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, Sergeant Levi called from his position as official timekeeper. Derek smiled, satisfied. Solid time, better than academy standards. Blake went next, 3 minutes, 58 seconds. Flynn managed 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Raven came in at 4 minutes, 15 seconds, respectable for someone with less upper body strength to muscle stubborn components. Jasper rounded out the group at 4 minutes, 45 seconds. They stood around the table pleased with themselves. Elite times proving their qualification level. Derek turned to Hazel. "Your turn, ma'am. Let's see what you've got." Hazel hesitated, her eyes moving from the rifle to the candidates, to the growing crowd of observers. Word had spread about yesterday's demonstrations, and more than 30 personnel had found reasons to be near the range this morning. Sergeant Levi watched intently from his position. Hugo Grant stood by the equipment shed, arms crossed. Even Ivy Brooks had emerged from the administration building. "I'm the instructor, not a participant," Hazel said quietly. "Scared." Blake's challenge was softer than Derek's, but equally pointed. "Can't do what you're teaching." Before Hazel could respond, Lieutenant Commander Shaw's voice cut across the range. He'd arrived without announcement, standing now beside the observation tower. "Instructor Parker, please demonstrate standard." Hazel looked at him. Morning light caught her face, revealing something in her expression that Shaw couldn't quite identify: reluctance perhaps, or resignation. She nodded once slowly and moved to the table. Derek offered her the blindfold with exaggerated courtesy. She tied it herself, testing the knot to ensure complete darkness. Then she sat at the table, hands resting on cold metal surface beside the disassembled weapon. Levi checked his stopwatch. "On your mark, ma'am." Hazel's hands found the rifle components. What happened next made every observer fall silent. Her fingers moved with speed that seemed impossible, not frantic or rushed, but flowing with absolute certainty. There was no fumbling, no hesitation, no moment of tactile searching. Each hand knew exactly where the next piece lay, exactly how it needed to rotate, exactly where it fit in the assembly sequence. The barrel slid into the receiver with a precise click. Bolt assembly followed, components aligning perfectly in darkness. Her hands became a blur of purposeful motion, trigger group pins, stock each piece finding its home with mechanical perfection. 20 seconds and Derek's mouth opened slightly. At 40 seconds, Blake leaned forward, trying to understand what he was seeing. At 1 minute, Raven whispered, "That's not possible." At 2 minutes, the rifle was complete. Hazel performed a functions check trigger, pull safety engagement magazine, well test all by feel alone. Then she set down the weapon and removed the blindfold. Levi stared at his stopwatch as if it had malfunctioned. 2 minutes, 47 seconds. Complete silence blanketed the range. 30-plus people stood frozen, processing what they had witnessed. That time wasn't just good. It wasn't even excellent. It was instructor level, Delta Force operator level, the kind of time that required thousands of repetitions burned into muscle memory so deep that blindness became irrelevant. Sergeant Levi found his voice first, speaking from the tower, with something approaching awe. "Ma'am, that's faster than any qualification time I've seen outside Fort Bragg. That's operator speed." Hugo Grant caught Hazel's eye and gave a tiny nod as if confirming something he'd suspected all along. Derek and Blake exchanged glances, their previous certainty crumbling. Flynn rubbed his face, trying to reconcile the soccer mom image with the demonstration they'd just witnessed. Jasper stood motionless, his usual smirk completely absent. Raven stepped forward, her voice careful. "Where did you learn to do that? Practice." Hazel's one-word answer revealed nothing and everything. "Nobody practices to that level, unless—" Blake started, then stopped, the implication hanging in the air. "Unless what Mr. Morrison—" Hazel's tone remained neutral, but her eyes held a challenge. He didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't finish it because completing that thought meant acknowledging something none of them were ready to accept. Shaw descended from the tower and approached the table. He picked up the rifle, performed his own functions check, then set it down with care that bordered on reverence. Instructor Parker, a word please. They moved away from the group standing near the equipment shed where their conversation wouldn't carry. The candidates watched, trying to read meaning into body language and expressions. Who are you? Shaw asked quietly. I'm exactly who my paperwork says I am. That assembly time says otherwise. Sometimes people have skills that don't fit tidy narratives, sir. Shaw studied her face, searching for cracks in her composure. He found none. I'm going to look into your background. That's your prerogative. Hazel's voice held no defensiveness, no fear, just calm acceptance. If you're hiding something, everyone's hiding something, Commander. The question is whether what I'm hiding affects my ability to teach these candidates. She met his gaze steadily. Does it? Shaw had no answer for that. After a long moment, he stepped back. Carry on? As he walked away, Derek pulled his team into a tight huddle, away from other observers. Something's seriously wrong here, he said, keeping his voice low. Civilians don't move like that. Maybe she was military once, Raven suggested. Administration supply. No way, Flynn shook his head firmly. That was operator speed. I've only seen that level at Bragg, and even then only from guys with decades of field time. Blake's mind worked through possibilities, his analytical nature, trying to force the pieces into a pattern. What if she's former special operations? What if she washed out or retired and doesn't want to talk about it? Then why hide it? Jasper asked. Why not just tell us? It would shut down all the criticism. Derek's eyes hadn't left Hazel, who was now setting up afternoon equipment with the same methodical precision she'd shown all week. Because people don't hide things they're proud of. They hide things that hurt. Afternoon drill moved to tactical scenarios, complex situations, requiring not just shooting skill, but strategic thinking under pressure. Hazel set up a mock hostage situation using target dummies positioned at various angles and distances. The setup was deliberately ambiguous, with multiple potential shooter positions and civilian placements that created overlapping fields of fire. Derek volunteered to go first, stepping into the scenario with his usual confidence. He studied the layout for 30 seconds, then made his call. Shooters behind the left barrier at approximately 300 yards. Civilian is wrong. Hazel's interruption was quiet but definitive. The civilian would be exposed to ricochet from that angle. Look again. Derek frowned and reassessed. His second attempt was closer but still missed key elements. Hazel walked him through the correct analysis: wind patterns affecting bullet trajectory, ground cover, providing concealment angles of approach that minimized civilian risk. It was clear, precise instruction, but something in her delivery suggested this wasn't theoretical knowledge. This was experience. Blake tried next, then Flynn. Each made similar mistakes, seeing obvious threats but missing subtle tactical considerations that separated competent soldiers from elite operators. Then Hazel demonstrated. She approached the scenario and began speaking, her voice taking on a different quality, crisp, analytical, the tone of someone who'd done real-time assessments under fire. Shooter behind left barrier, 40% cover, effective at 320 yards. Civilian position 15 degrees, right currently protected by terrain fold, but vulnerable if shooter relocates. Wind from northeast at 12 miles per hour, creates drift pattern, favoring shooter's position. Optimal engagement flank right, using dead ground. Depression establish position at 280 yards. Wait for wind gust to mask. Approach. Sound engaged during civilian's natural movement away from threat axis. She rattled off the analysis in less than 20 seconds. A complete tactical picture that accounted for terrain ballistics, human behavior, environmental factors. It wasn't teaching. It was operational briefing. Blake interrupted, his voice sharp with confusion. How do you know that's advanced tactical assessment? That's the kind of brief we get from mission planners with decades of experience. Or from people who've been in similar situations, Flynn added quietly. Hazel turned to face them, and for the first time, something flickered across her expression, a crack in carefully maintained composure. She pulled her sleeve down slightly, a gesture so subtle most missed it. But Jasper, standing at the right angle, caught a glimpse of her forearm. The skin there bore marks that looked like old scars, thin parallel lines, consistent with rope burns. Ma'am, he said slowly, those scars, how did you— Gardening accident. The lie was smooth, practiced, utterly unconvincing. Flynn had seen them too. Those look like extraction training injuries, fast rope burns. Derek moved closer, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by something sharper, more focused. Instructor Parker, where did you serve? I didn't serve. That's a lie. Raven's voice was soft but certain. I know evasion when I see it, when I hear it. The group closed in slightly, not threatening, but intensely curious, like hounds catching a scent. Hazel stood her ground, but her breathing change became more controlled, more deliberate. That 4-count rhythm Master Chief Silas had noticed. This is inappropriate, she said firmly. We're here to train, not discuss my personal history. Your personal history is teaching us, Blake countered. Everything you demonstrate, every correction you make, it's all coming from somewhere. We have a right to know our instructor's qualifications. You have a right to competent instruction, which I'm providing. Derek's challenge coin appeared in his hand again, spinning slowly. What are you hiding? Hazel looked at each of them in turn, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked toward the equipment shed without another word. That's not an answer, Derek called after her. It's the only one you're getting, she replied without turning around. They stood in frustrated silence as she disappeared into the shed. After a moment, Sergeant Levi descended from the observation tower and approached the group. You all need to back off, he said quietly. She's hiding something, Derek insisted. Everyone here is hiding something. That's called privacy. Levi's tone hardened. But I'll tell you this, in 2 days she's taught you more about precision shooting than most instructors manage in 2 weeks. Your groupings are tighter, your calculations are faster, and your tactical thinking has improved measurably. So, maybe focus on that instead of whatever personal mystery you think needs solving. But, Blake started, but nothing. Class dismissed. Report back at 0600 tomorrow. As the candidates dispersed, Levi noticed Master Chief Silas standing near the administration building, partially concealed by shadow. The older man had been watching again, his expression thoughtful. When their eyes met, Silas gave a slight nod and walked away. Something was happening here, Levi realized. Something bigger than hazing a new instructor. The pieces were moving, sliding toward a revelation none of them fully understood yet. That evening in the equipment room, after everyone else had left, Hazel sat alone at a workbench. The M110 rifle lay before her, fully assembled and gleaming under fluorescent lights. Her hands rested on either side of it, not touching, just present. The trembling had returned. Not obvious, not even noticeable to casual observation, but there a fine vibration in her fingers that spoke to internal pressure building beyond sustainable levels. The door opened softly. Captain Amber Walsh, the base medical officer, entered and closed it behind her. She'd known Hazel for 3 years, ever since Hazel had arrived at Camp Pendleton with paperwork that was technically correct, but strategically vague. Rough week, Amber asked, gently pulling up a stool beside her friend. They're pushing. Hazel's voice was barely above a whisper. They're supposed to push. That's how SEAL candidates are wired. I know. Hazel closed her eyes. But every demonstration, every correction I make, I can feel it getting closer. Feel them getting closer to questions I can't answer without revealing who you really are. Hazel nodded, eyes still closed. Behind her eyelids, images flickered, desert sand scope reticles, the weight of a rifle that had become an extension of her body. Faces that would never age beyond the moment her bullets found them. 2,847 faces. I haven't fired in 3 years, Amber, she said, opening her eyes. Not since Syria. Not since your team died. The words hung in the air, heavy with memory. Amber knew the abbreviated version, that Hazel had been special operations, that a mission went catastrophically wrong, that she'd been given a choice between continuing to serve or accepting a paperwork death and starting over. She didn't know the details. Those remained classified at levels even medical officers couldn't access. Tomorrow they want me to demonstrate qualification shooting, Hazel continued. Colonel Webb is coming. The candidates complained formally. I have to prove I'm competent to teach them. Are you... Hazel laughed, but it held no humor. I could outshoot every person on this base, every person in this state. That's not the question. Then what is? Whether I can do it without falling apart. Whether I can touch that rifle, look through that scope, and squeeze that trigger without seeing all those faces again. Her hands finally touched the weapon fingers tracing along the barrel. This particular rifle has seen combat in 6 countries across 3 continents. It has a confirmed count of, she stopped swallowing hard. It shouldn't be on a training range. It should be in a museum or melted down. Amber placed her hand over Hazel's. You don't have to do this. Tell the colonel the truth. Tell them all the truth. That I'm legally dead, that the Pentagon faked my KIA status to protect a program that officially never existed, that would go over well. Better than the alternative. Next, which is what breaking down in front of 6 candidates who already think I'm weak, proving them right. Hazel pulled her hand away, stood up, paced to the window overlooking the darkened range. Seth died so I could walk away from this, so I could have peace. And here I am 3 years later, about to pick up the rifle again, because some cocky kids don't think a woman in flannel can teach them anything. Seth died because a mission went sideways. That wasn't your fault. He died covering my withdrawal. 4 people died so I could escape. That's absolutely my fault. Amber stood and joined her at the window. What would Seth say if he were here? Hazel was quiet for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the glass. He'd tell me to stop running, to face it head on, to remember that the skills that haunt me are the same skills that kept people alive. She touched the window, her fingertip leaving a small mark on the glass. He'd say that teaching these kids to survive is worth the cost of remembering. Then maybe listen to him. After Amber left, Hazel remained at the window for another hour. On the workbench behind her, barely visible in the dim light, sat a black challenge coin, number 001. The only marking beyond that was a shadow figure in a scope's crosshairs, the emblem of Ghost Unit 7, a program that had been terminated, buried, and erased from official records. She picked up the coin and held it to the light, watching reflections dance across its surface. Tomorrow would bring reckoning. Tomorrow would force her to become, for a brief moment, the thing she'd spent 3 years trying to leave behind. Tomorrow, 50-plus witnesses would see Hazel Parker stop being a civilian instructor and become, once again, Ghost One. The question was whether she'd survive the transformation. Friday morning arrived with crystal clarity, no fog, no clouds, just piercing sunlight that made the California landscape sharp-edged and unforgiving. By 0830, the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center had gathered a crowd that far exceeded normal training observations. Word had spread through Camp Pendleton like wildfire. The civilian instructor was being challenged. SEAL candidates had filed formal complaints. Colonel Webb was coming to adjudicate. And the instructor, that quiet woman who demonstrated impossible skills, would have to prove herself or be removed. More than 50 personnel found reasons to be present. Some were instructors curious about the outcome. Others were candidates from different programs who'd heard the rumors. Some were simply bored Marines looking for entertainment. All of them lined the observation areas, creating an audience for what would become a defining moment. The 6 SEAL candidates stood together near the firing line, their earlier mockery replaced by nervous anticipation. They'd pushed for this confrontation, but now watching Hazel prepare equipment with calm precision, some doubted the wisdom of their insistence. "We might have made a mistake," Raven said quietly. "Too late now," Derek replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. At 0845, Colonel Archer Webb arrived in a staff car accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Shaw and unexpectedly Master Chief Silas Garrett. The older man's presence drew attention. He rarely attended training exercises anymore, focusing instead on administrative duties. But here he was, his weathered face unreadable as he surveyed the assembled crowd. Webb strode to the center of the range, his command presence silencing murmured conversations. Instructor Parker, front and center. Hazel approached, stopping at attention 3 paces from the colonel. She wore the same flannel shirt and jeans, but somehow they seemed less shabby, now more like chosen armor than circumstance. "You understand why we're here?" Webb asked. "Yes, sir. The candidates question your qualifications. They believe you lack practical experience necessary to prepare them for advanced operations." He paused, letting the accusation hang. Normally, I would dismiss such complaints as entitled grumbling, but circumstances require demonstration. You will complete a qualification shot to standard, witnessed, and verified. "Understood, sir." Webb gestured to the range. 1,200 yards, moving target at 8 miles per hour, lateral movement. Wind is currently 15 miles per hour from northwest. You will have one shot. Success means you continue as instructor. Failure means reassignment. One shot. In front of 50-plus witnesses. After 3 years without pulling a trigger in live conditions, Hazel's throat tightened, but her expression remained neutral. "Any questions?" Webb asked. "No, sir." "Then begin when ready." Hazel walked to the firing position, her steps measured and deliberate. Hugo Grant had prepared her rifle not a standard training weapon, but her personal M110, the one with serial number GU7001. He'd checked it twice, knowing what was at stake. She knelt at the firing line and began setting up. The movements were automatic bipod deployment, stock adjustment scope calibration. Her hands knew these motions the way lungs know breathing, but behind the mechanical precision, her mind was screaming. 3 years, 3 years of peace, 3 years of silence. And now, because of pride and stupid masculinity and her own inability to back down, she was about to shatter that silence. The target appeared downrange, a standard silhouette mounted on a lateral rail system. It began moving at the prescribed 8 miles per hour, swaying slightly with each direction. Change. 1,200 yards away it looked tiny, a dark shape against lighter background, vulnerable and distant. Hazel settled into position. Her breathing slowed, automatically falling into that 4-count pattern she'd used for 18 years. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. In the observation tower, Master Chief Silas went rigid. That breathing, that exact rhythm. He'd seen it described in a classified briefing 7 years ago, part of a program assessment for Ghost Unit 7. That pattern wasn't taught in standard training. It was a signature technique developed specifically for extreme-range precision work. He leaned forward, studying Hazel with new intensity. Lieutenant Commander Shaw noticed the movement. "Something wrong, Master Chief?" Shaw asked quietly. "That breathing pattern," Silas whispered. 4-count box breathing. That's not standard issue. What do you mean, I mean? Silas's voice dropped even lower. "I mean that pattern is specific to one program, a program that was supposed to be terminated 4 years ago." Shaw's eyes widened slightly. "You don't think—" "I don't know what to think, but I'm about to find out." On the firing line, Hazel's world had narrowed to the scope's circular view. The target moved left to right, passing through her reticle with mechanical regularity. She calculated windage automatically 15 miles per hour. Northwest meant roughly 21 inches drift at this range. The moving target required lead time, approximately 3 feet at 8 miles per hour velocity. Her finger touched the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. That's all it took. 2 pounds and a life ended. She'd applied that pressure 2,847 times, and each application had been justified, necessary, legal, under rules of engagement. But legal didn't mean easy. Legal didn't erase the faces. A bead of sweat ran down her temple. The scope's image wavered slightly. Somewhere in the crowd, she heard Derek's voice. "Bet she misses by 10 feet. That voice, that arrogant certainty, that assumption that she was less than incapable, unworthy. Hazel's breathing steadied. Her finger increased pressure. The world stopped. In that frozen moment between decision and action, everything crystallized. The wind, the target's movement, the rifle's cant, the Earth's rotation affecting bullet drift. All of it compressed into a single point of absolute certainty. She squeezed. The rifle cracked sharp, final undeniable. The recoil pushed into her shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's flight time, that fraction of a second where physics and skill intersected with consequence. Downrange, the target jerked. Dead center. Moving at 8 miles per hour, 1,200 yards away and 15 miles per hour, wind and the bullet found its mark with precision that made mathematics look like prophecy. In the observation tower, the spotter's voice crackled over the radio, filled with disbelief. "Hit! Center mass. Moving target at 1,200 yards. Perfect shot." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Derek's face drained of color. Blake's mouth hung open. Flynn stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. Raven's hand had risen unconsciously as if to shield her eyes from something too bright to see directly. But Master Chief Silas wasn't watching the target. He was watching Hazel. She stood setting the rifle down with practiced care. Her hands moved to adjust her equipment, preparing to pack up. And as she reached down to pick up the rifle case, her sleeve caught on the bipod, pulling the fabric tight against her shoulder. The flannel shirt had been loose concealing, but now pulled taut by the caught fabric, it revealed contours beneath defined muscle that came from years of carrying heavy weapons, of holding firing positions for hours of physical conditioning that went far beyond civilian fitness. Silas descended from the tower, each step deliberate. Shaw followed, confused by the Master Chief's intensity, but trusting his judgment enough not to question it. They crossed the range toward Hazel, who was kneeling to pack her equipment. "Ma'am," Silas said, his voice carrying command weight that stopped her movement. "Your rifle. May I see the serial number?" Hazel froze. For the first time all week, real fear flickered across her face. She knew what that number meant, knew what Silas would understand once he saw it. "It's just a rifle, Master Chief," she said softly. "Then, you won't mind if I verify that." It wasn't a question. Slowly, Hazel handed over the weapon. Silas turned it, examining the receiver where serial numbers were stamped. His fingers traced the markings GU7001. His face went completely still, the kind of stillness that comes from shock too profound for immediate reaction. "What does that mean?" Shaw asked, moving closer. Silas's voice when he spoke was barely audible. "Ghost Unit 7, number 001. That's..." He looked up at Hazel, his eyes wide. "That's the primary unit rifle, the one assigned to the program's lead operator." "What's Ghost Unit 7? Derek called from 10 yards away, unable to contain his curiosity. But Silas wasn't listening to him. He was watching Hazel, who had turned partially away, as if preparing to flee. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something directly." "Please don't," Hazel whispered. "Who are you?" Each word carried the weight of suspicion, transforming into terrible certainty. Before she could answer, before she could deflect or evade or construct another careful lie, Flynn made a critical mistake. He stepped forward, reaching to stop her from leaving his hand grabbing her shoulder to turn her toward him. The fabric of her flannel shirt, already pulled tight from the earlier catch, couldn't withstand the additional stress. The collar ripped a clean tear that exposed her upper shoulder and collarbone, and there, burned into skin with permanent ink, was a tattoo that made time stop. The number 2847 in precise military font, each digit rendered with technical accuracy. Below it, an emblem-stylized scope crosshairs with a shadow figure behind them, barely visible, more suggestion than form. The mark of Ghost Unit 7. Complete silence descended on the range. Not the silence of anticipation, but the silence of revelation so profound that breath itself seemed suspended. 50-plus people stood frozen minds, struggling to process the significance of what they were seeing. That number. 2,847. Flynn's hand released her shoulder as if burned. He stumbled backward, his face reflecting horror mixed with dawning comprehension. Master Chief Silas snapped to full military attention, his right hand rising in a crisp salute. The movement was automatic, trained the response of a professional warrior, recognizing something beyond rank, beyond normal military hierarchy. "Ghost 1. He said, his voice breaking slightly. The title fell into the silence like a stone into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread through every observer. The tension is building, right? If you're starting to suspect Hazel isn't who she appears to be, smash that subscribe button, because the clues are about to get wild. Drop a comment below with your theory about her real identity. Is she ex-military special forces? Something even more classified. The truth is way crazier than you think. Keep watching, the pieces are coming together. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and careful negotiations. Pentagon officials arrived at Camp Pendleton with briefcases full of non-disclosure agreements and strategic concerns. The story had leaked, as stories always do, but the military machine moved quickly to contain and control the narrative. By Monday morning, an official statement had been released. Sergeant Major Hazel Parker had been operating under classified protocols that were now being selectively declassified. Her service record remained largely redacted, but enough was confirmed to satisfy public curiosity while protecting operational security. The 6 SEAL candidates returned to training at 0600 as ordered. They arrived 15 minutes early, uniforms immaculate, gear squared away with parade ground precision. When Hazel entered the briefing room, they stood at attention without being told. "At ease," she said quietly. "Take your seats." They sat, but the casual slouching of the previous week was gone. Derek kept his back straight, hands folded on the table. Blake's phone remained in his pocket. Flynn's usual smirk had been replaced by focused attention. Raven sat with the others now, no longer distancing herself. Jasper and the fifth candidate, whom everyone called simply Torres, waited with visible tension. Hazel set down her tablet and faced them directly. "We're going to address what happened Friday, and then we're never going to speak of it again." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am," they responded in unison. "You treated me with disrespect based on assumptions about my appearance, my gender, and my civilian status. Those assumptions were wrong, but that's not the point. The point is that your respect shouldn't depend on someone's background. It should be baseline human decency." She paused, letting the words settle. "I accept your written apologies. Now prove them through your actions." "This, ma'am," Derek spoke carefully. "We've been discussing among ourselves. We'd like to continue learning from you if you'll have us. We understand now what we couldn't see before, that you're teaching us something more valuable than shooting skills." "Which is?" "How to carry the weight," Blake answered. "How to live with what we're training to become." Hazel studied them for a long moment, seeing something in their faces that hadn't been there before, humility perhaps, or the first stirrings of wisdom that came from confronting one's own ignorance. "Then let's continue," she said simply. "Today we focus on tactical decision-making, specifically learning when not to take the shot." Over the next 3 days, Hazel pushed them harder than any instructor they had encountered. But the difficulty wasn't physical, it was moral and psychological. She presented scenarios where the right answer was walking away. Situations where killing was legally justified but strategically wrong. Moments where precision wasn't enough if the wisdom to apply it was absent. Wednesday afternoon brought a particularly challenging exercise. Hazel set up a scenario involving potential civilian casualties in a high-value target engagement. The 6 candidates worked through the problem, calculating angles and timings, preparing for the shot. "Stop," Hazel commanded when Derek was halfway through his firing solution. "Why are you taking this shot?" "Because the target is confirmed hostile, ma'am. High-value objective. Mission parameters indicate elimination." "At what cost?" Derek hesitated, reviewing his calculations. "Civilian casualty probability is approximately 15%. 15% of what number? There are approximately 8 civilians in the potential blast radius. So you're accepting that 1, maybe 2 innocent people will die to eliminate this target?" Hazel's voice remained even non-judgmental. "Is that target worth that cost?" "Mission parameters say yes, ma'am." "Mission parameters aren't carrying those faces for the rest of your life. You are." She walked to the scenario board and pointed at the civilian markers. "These aren't statistics. They're not acceptable losses. They're real people with real families who will grieve real grief, and you'll know every single day that your precision killed them just as surely as it killed your target." Raven raised her hand. "But ma'am, if we don't take the shot, the target escapes. How many people might die because we let them go?" "That's the impossible equation," Hazel acknowledged. "That's the weight. There are no clean answers. But I can tell you this, every one of my 2,847 kills was taken with 0 civilian casualties. 0. Because I waited for the right shot, not the available shot. Sometimes that meant watching a target escape. Sometimes that meant mission failure. But it meant I could live with my count." The room fell silent as they absorbed this. Blake was the first to speak. "How long did you have to wait for the right shots?" "Fallujah, December 2004. I had a target in my sights for 16 hours. High-value commander, responsible for multiple IED attacks. But he was surrounded by civilians, women, children, elderly. I watched him through my scope for 16 hours, waiting for him to separate. My spotter wanted to take the shot anyway, said, acceptable casualty doctrine, covered it." "What did you do?" Flynn asked. "I waited. Hour 17 he moved to a different building, alone. I took the shot then. 1-round mission, complete, 0 civilian casualties." Hazel looked at each of them in turn. That patience, that refusal to accept good enough, that's what made me effective. Not speed, not aggression. Patience married to precision. Torres, who'd been quiet throughout the week, finally spoke. "Ma'am, how do you live with the ones you did take, even if they were all legally justified?" Hazel was quiet for a moment, considering how much truth to share. "I don't have a good answer for that. Some days are easier than others. Some faces fade, some don't. I go to therapy twice a month. I take medication for PTSD. I have nightmares that medication doesn't touch. And I remind myself that every person I killed was actively trying to kill Americans or allies, that their deaths meant other people lived. Does that help? Raven asked softly. Sometimes, not always. Hazel's honesty was stark, unvarnished. But it's what I have. It's how I cope. And teaching you to minimize that burden, that's how I find meaning in mine. The week ended with their respect earned not through fear or awe of her capabilities, but through recognition of her humanity. They saw in her not just the legend of Ghost One, but the reality of what living with that legend cost. Friday afternoon, as they packed equipment, Derek approached Hazel privately. "Ma'am, I need to say something that wasn't in the written apology." "Go ahead." "I'm from a small town in Montana. Grew up with traditional ideas about women, about military roles, about who could do what. Meeting you, seeing what you can do, understanding what you've survived, it's forced me to confront prejudices I didn't even know I had." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm grateful for that. Even though the lesson was humiliating, I needed it." "The best lessons usually hurt," Hazel replied. "What matters is what you do with them. I'm going to be better. We all are. Not just as operators, but as people." After he left, Hazel allowed herself a small smile. Maybe Seth had been right. Maybe teaching really was worth the cost. Here's something most people don't think about. Combat veterans and high-risk professionals need specialized financial planning that standard advisors simply can't provide. Disability insurance that actually covers service-related injuries, investment strategies that account for unpredictable deployment schedules, and estate planning that protects families if the worst happens. Many veterans leave service without proper financial security because they didn't have access to advisors who understand military benefits, VA loans, and special tax considerations. If you've served or work in high-risk fields, finding a financial advisor who specializes in your unique situation isn't just smart. It could save your family from financial devastation down the line. The consequences of Hazel's exposure rippled outward in expanding circles, touching every aspect of Camp Pendleton and beyond. Within 48 hours of the revelation, official recognition began. JSA Command placed calls requesting briefings on counter-sniper tactics. SOCOM wanted her input on training protocol updates. The CIA offered a contractor position with a salary that made Colonel Webb whistle when he saw the number $500,000 annually minimum commitment. Hazel declined them all. "I appreciate the offers," she told the succession of officials who made the pilgrimage to Camp Pendleton. "But I'm not interested in returning to operational work. My value is here teaching the next generation. But your expertise," one particularly persistent CIA recruiter began, "is available through consultation, not deployment. I'll review training materials. I'll provide tactical analysis. I'll answer questions within my security clearance, but I won't carry a rifle in active operations again." "Why not?" "You're clearly still capable." Hazel's answer was simple and final. "Because I've killed enough people for one lifetime. Now, I'd like to teach others how to kill fewer." The DevGru commander, a 3-star admiral with combat experience spanning 4 decades, flew to California personally. He sat across from Hazel in the base commander's office, his uniform bearing decorations that told their own story of service and sacrifice. "Sergeant Major Parker?" He began using her full rank for the first time in years. "I understand your reluctance, but consider this. You could train the elite of the elite, the operators who need your specific skill set most." "That's what I'm doing here, sir. I mean, at our facility, full-time, with candidates who are already at the highest levels." Hazel considered this more seriously than the other offers. "Part-time," she countered. "I'll come to your facility once per quarter, 4 days of intensive instruction, but my primary commitment remains here with the broader candidate pool." The Admiral studied her reading between the lines. "You think the SEALs who mocked you need you more than the elite operators?" "I think everyone needs to learn humility before they learn to kill efficiently. The elite operators already have the second part. These candidates are still learning the first." He smiled, recognizing wisdom when he heard it. "Part-time it is. I'll have contracts drawn up." That concession set the pattern. Hazel would consult as advised and occasionally teach specialized courses. but her home remained the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center at Camp Pendleton, where candidates arrived with more arrogance than skill and left with the beginnings of wisdom. The base culture shifted measurably in the weeks following the revelation. Respect for instructors increased across all programs. The casual dismissiveness that had sometimes characterized candidate interactions with teaching staff evaporated, replaced by genuine professionalism. Young recruits approached Hazel constantly, now seeking guidance that went beyond tactical instruction. Ivy Brooks reported that female candidate applications had increased by 300% within a month. Dr. Naomi Cross noted that retention rates for female personnel improved significantly as word spread about Hazel's presence and influence. "You're changing the culture," Naomi told her over coffee one morning. "Not just here, but throughout the special operations community." "I'm just doing my job," Hazel protested. "You're doing more than that. You're proving that excellence has no gender, that strength comes in unexpected forms, that legends can be human." Naomi smiled warmly. "Young women see you and realize they can aspire to anything. That's worth more than any number of confirmed kills." Master Chief Silas Garrett became an unexpected ally. He'd spent 30 years in special operations, had seen combat across 3 decades, and carried his own burden of necessary violence. He understood what Hazel was trying to do because he'd tried to do something similar in his final years of service. They developed a quiet friendship built on shared understanding. Once per week, they met for coffee at 0530 before the base fully awakened. They didn't talk about kills or missions or the weight they carried. Instead, they discussed teaching methods, candidate psychology, and the small victories that came from watching young warriors develop wisdom alongside skill. "You know what I appreciate most about your approach," Silas said one morning. "You're not trying to make them into you. You're trying to make them into better versions of themselves." "That's the only approach that works," Hazel replied. "I can teach them to shoot, but I can't teach them to carry what shooting costs. They have to discover that themselves. And you guide that discovery." "I try." 3 months after the revelation, Pentagon officials announced selective declassification of Ghost Unit 7 records. The public learned that the program had existed, that it had been extraordinarily effective, and that Sergeant Major Hazel Parker had been its most successful operator. Specific missions remained classified, but enough was revealed to satisfy public interest while protecting operational details. The media descended, of course. Reporters camped outside Camp Pendleton's gates requesting interviews. Morning talk shows extended invitations. A major publisher offered an advance for her memoir that made the CIA contractor position look modest by comparison. Hazel declined every interview, ignored every invitation, and returned the publisher's contract unread. "I'm not interested in fame," she told Colonel Webb when he suggested that controlled media access might be strategically valuable. "I'm interested in doing my job without cameras watching. The story's already out there. You might as well control the narrative. The only narrative that matters is the one my candidates learn. Everything else is noise." Webb respected that decision even as he fielded increasingly aggressive media requests. Eventually, he issued a statement that Sergeant Major Parker would not be granting interviews, that her focus remained on training, and that further attempts to contact her would be considered harassment of military personnel. The media eventually moved on to other stories, as media always does. But the legend remained growing in the retelling until Hazel Parker Ghost 1 became a permanent fixture in special operations mythology. Okay, things are getting intense. If your heart is racing right now, hit that like button and share this video with anyone who loves a good underdog story. Because what's about to be revealed in the next few minutes, it's going to make your jaw drop. Hazel's secret is about to explode into the open in the most shocking way possible. Don't you dare scroll away now. 6 months passed. Autumn arrived in California with cooler temperatures and golden light that made the mountains glow at sunrise. The Advanced Marksmanship Training Center had become Hazel's kingdom, a place where her word was law and her methods were gospel. The 6 SEAL candidates who'd begun her story graduated with honors ranking at the top of their class. Their technical skills were excellent, but their tactical judgment was exceptional. They had learned not just how to take shots, but when to refuse them. Their instructors noted an unusual maturity in their decision-making, a thoughtfulness that typically took years to develop. On graduation day, they stood in formation as Colonel Webb presented their qualifications. When the ceremony ended, they approached Hazel as a group. Derek carried a wrapped package which he presented with formal military bearing. "Ma'am, we wanted to give you something that expressed our gratitude." Hazel unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph, the 6 of them with Hazel taken during their final week of training. All 7 were smiling, a genuine moment of camaraderie captured in time. But it was the inscription that made her throat tighten. "To Ghost." "One, you taught us precision, but more importantly, you taught us humanity. We'll carry both forward. Thank you for seeing past our worst to find our best." All 6 had signed it, along with a message from each Derek. "You made me question everything I thought I knew. That was the greatest gift." Blake, "Patience married to precision. I'll remember." Flynn, "Real strength is knowing when to walk away. Lesson learned." Raven, "You showed me what female excellence looks like. I won't forget." Jasper, 2,847, but also 0 civilian casualties. That's the standard. Torres, "You taught us to be better warriors by being better humans first." Hazel had to look away for a moment, blinking against unexpected tears. "Thank you," she managed. "This means more than you know." "Ma'am," Blake spoke for the group, "if we're ever in trouble out there in the field, can we call you?" "You can always call. I may not be able to deploy, but I can advise. I can help." She looked at each of them. "Come home alive. That's the only thing I ask. Come home and be worthy of the capabilities you've been given." "Yes, ma'am." They responded in unison, and this time the words carried weight earned through hard lessons and harder truths. They saluted her, a gesture of respect that transcended rank, and she returned it with precision that spoke to 18 years of service. Then they were gone, moving forward into careers that would test everything she'd taught them. Sergeant Levi Stone approached as they departed. "You did good work with them, ma'am." "They did the work themselves. I just pointed them in the right direction." "That's what good teaching is." Levi paused, choosing his words carefully. "You know, when you first arrived 3 years ago, I thought you were running from something. Now, I understand you were running towards something, a purpose that makes sense of what you survived. Is there a difference? Maybe not, but it's working. The candidates you're training are different. Better. They're learning to think before they act, to value life, even as they prepare to take it. That's rare in this community." Hazel watched the California mountains catch the afternoon light, the same view Seth Foster had loved. "My friend used to say that the measure of a warrior isn't how many enemies they kill, but how many friends they bring home. I'm trying to increase the second number. You're succeeding." Later that evening, after the base had quieted and most personnel had gone home, Hazel stood alone on the range. The targets downrange were silent shapes in the gathering darkness. She didn't have her rifle, didn't need it. This was just a moment of reflection, of acknowledging how far she'd come since that explosive revelation 6 months ago. Her phone buzzed. A text from Amber Walsh. "Proud of you. Dinner this weekend." She typed back, "Absolutely. My place or yours?" "Yours. I'll bring wine and questionable decisions." Hazel smiled, pocketing the phone. Normal life, normal friendships. Normal evenings that didn't involve scopes and calculations and the weight of lives measured in inches. 3 weeks later, Hazel was in the middle of teaching a new group of candidates when a staff member interrupted. "Ma'am, there's a ceremony request. The base commander wants to see you. Now, when you're available, ma'am." Hazel dismissed the class early and made her way to the administration building. Colonel Webb waited in his office along with Master Chief Silas and a lieutenant colonel she didn't recognize. "Sergeant Major Parker." Webb began formally. "We've received approval for something that's been in the works for several months. The base naming committee with Pentagon concurrence has approved the dedication of this facility's primary range." He handed her a document. Hazel read it, her vision blurring slightly as she processed the words. "The Seth Foster Memorial Range, dedicated in honor of Sergeant First Class Seth Foster, KIA Syria, 2021, and in recognition of his service sacrifice and vision for training future generations of warriors. The ceremony is scheduled for next month," Webb continued. "We'd like you to speak if you're willing." Hazel couldn't find words immediately. This was the promise made real, the purpose given form. Seth's dream of a place where warriors learned to come home, it would bear his name now, permanent recognition of what he'd believed, and what he died protecting. "Yes, sir," she finally managed. "I'd be honored. Let's talk about something critical: legal protection for veterans and active duty personnel. Military law is complex, from wrongful discharge cases to VA benefits, disputes, disability claims, and even criminal defense under UCMJ. Many service members don't realize they have rights that civilian lawyers often don't understand. Specialized military legal services can help with everything from correcting military records to fighting for proper disability ratings to appealing denied benefits. Some law firms focus exclusively on veterans' rights and know exactly how to navigate the VA system and military bureaucracy. If you've served and are facing legal issues or benefits disputes, having an attorney who speaks military language can mean the difference between justice and getting lost in the system. The dedication ceremony took place on a clear November morning. More than 200 personnel attended, filling the seating area and spilling onto the surrounding grounds. Seth's family came, his parents, his sister Rachel, his brother Marcus. They'd been told the truth about his death, about the mission that went wrong, about the woman who'd survived carrying his sacrifice. Hazel stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled crowd. The new sign hung behind her, covered by a blue cloth awaiting unveiling: Seth Foster Memorial Range. She'd prepared remarks, written and rewritten them over 2 weeks, but standing there facing people who needed to understand why this moment mattered, the prepared words seemed inadequate. "Seth Foster was my friend," she began simply, "and we served together for 6 years across 4 combat zones. He was a better person than I'll ever be, kinder, funnier, more optimistic about humanity, despite seeing its worst manifestations." The crowd listened in complete silence. "Before our last mission, we talked about retirement, about what we'd do when the fighting ended. Seth said he wanted to find a place where he could teach young people to shoot straight and think clearly, a place where warriors learn to come home, not just physically, but emotionally, where they learn that true strength isn't in the ability to kill, but in the wisdom to choose not to." She paused, steadying her voice. "He died, giving me the chance to escape with intelligence that saved lives. He and 3 others held their position so I could withdraw. That sacrifice haunts me every single day. But it also drives me, because every candidate I train to survive, every operator who comes home, because they learned patience over aggression, that's me honoring what Seth believed." Rachel Foster, Seth's sister, sat in the front row, with tears streaming down her face. Hazel met her eyes and continued. "This range isn't a monument to death. It's a monument to life, to the belief that we can train warriors who value human existence even as they prepare to defend it. Seth believed that. He died for it, and now his name will stand here as a permanent reminder that the best warriors are those who understand the cost of warfare and work to minimize it." She stepped back from the podium. Colonel Webb joined her, and together they pulled the cloth from the sign. The words gleamed in the morning sun: Seth Foster Memorial Range, and below it, teaching warriors to come home. The applause was thunderous, sustained, carrying weight beyond mere appreciation. After the ceremony, Seth's family approached Hazel. His mother embraced her wordlessly. His father shook her hand with a grip that conveyed both grief and gratitude. Rachel, his sister, held Hazel's hands and spoke quietly. "Thank you for surviving, for honoring him, for making his dream real." "He made it possible," Hazel replied. "I'm just the one who got to build it." "No, you're the one who chose to build it despite the pain. That takes a different kind of courage. Still here, good. Because the story doesn't end here. There's a sequel set up at the very end that will leave you desperate for part 2. If you want more stories about hidden legends, secret identities, and epic reversals, check out the next video in the description below. And comment Ghost 1 if this story gave you chills. Let's blow up the comment section. The months following the dedication ceremony settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Hazel taught her classes, consulted with various special operations units, and slowly built a life that balanced her past with her present. Her friendship with Amber deepened. They had dinner twice a week, went hiking on weekends, attended movies and concerts like regular people living regular lives. Amber never pushed for details about the classified operations content to know her friend, as she was, now rather than what she'd been. Master Chief Silas became a mentor figure, sharing his own journey from operator to instructor, offering wisdom earned through parallel experiences. Ivy Brooks continued her maternal oversight, ensuring Hazel ate properly and took breaks. Dr. Naomi Cross provided professional support, advocating for resources and protecting Hazel from administrative burdens. Hugo Grant maintained his quiet alliance, ensuring equipment was perfect and backing Hazel's decisions without need for explanation. Young Caleb Hart, now advanced in his own training, often sought her guidance, drawn by genuine respect rather than fear or awe. It was as close to peace as Hazel had known in 20 years. But peace she'd learned long ago was temporary, a luxury borrowed from the spaces between crises, never truly owned. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late December, 3 weeks before Christmas. Hazel was in her small apartment off base, reviewing training plans for the new year. Her phone buzzed with a number that showed only as unknown encrypted. She stared at it for 3 full rings, knowing what it represented. Encrypted calls from unknown numbers meant classified operations, urgent situations, problems that couldn't be solved through normal channels. She answered. "This is Parker." The voice that responded was electronically distorted, rendered gender-neutral and unidentifiable. "Ghost One, we have a situation. I'm retired. We're aware. This isn't a deployment request. It's a consultation that requires your unique expertise. I'm listening. Hostage situation, Syria border region, 12 American citizens, 3 Allied intelligence officers, held in a compound that our analysts say presents an impossible shot scenario. Impossible how? 2,400 yards through urban terrain, with multiple obstructions and thermal distortion patterns. Conventional wisdom says it can't be done, but we found a reference in Ghost Unit 7 Operational Archives. August 2019, Mosul. 2,380 yards, 3 hostages, 0 casualties. Hazel's breath caught. She remembered that mission with crystalline clarity. The longest shot of her career, taken under conditions that violated every textbook principle. She'd waited 17 hours for atmospheric conditions to align, for thermal patterns to stabilize, for the target to position himself precisely where physics said the bullet could reach. That was different, she said. Different terrain, different conditions. But same principle. We need you to review the scenario and tell us if it's possible. If it is, we need you to guide the shot. Guide, not take. We have a shooter. DevGru trained by you actually 3 years ago. He's willing, but admits he's never attempted anything at this range. He's requesting your consultation. Who is it? Classified. But he says you taught him that patience married to precision is worth more than speed married to aggression. Derek. Had to be Derek Hayes. That was his phrase, the lesson he'd taken from her teaching. What's the timeline? Hazel asked. 48 hours. After that, intelligence suggests the hostages will be moved to a location we can't track. This is the window. Send me the tactical package. I'll review it. There's one more detail. The distorted voice carried weight, now preparing her for additional complexity. One of the hostages is Rachel Foster, civilian contractor engineering specialist captured during infrastructure assessment. The world tilted. Rachel, Seth's sister, the woman who'd thanked her at the dedication ceremony for honoring her brother's memory. That's not coincidence, Hazel said flatly. Someone knows the connection. We believe so. This may be targeted specifically to draw you out. And you're still calling me because 12 Americans are depending on someone making an impossible shot, and you're the only person alive who's proven it can be done. Hazel stood and walked to her window, looking out at the California darkness. Somewhere across the world, Rachel Foster was being held by people who would kill her without hesitation. Rachel, who'd lost her brother to violence, now faced violence herself. And the only person who could potentially save her was the woman who'd survived when Seth hadn't. 48 hours, Hazel repeated. I'll need secure communications, real-time satellite imagery, and direct access to your shooter. Done. Equipment is being delivered to Camp Pendleton as we speak. Secure facility has been prepared. I'm not deploying. I want that absolutely clear. Understood. Remote consultation only. But, Ghost One, the voice paused. If this goes wrong, if we lose those hostages, Rachel Foster included, you'll carry that too. You understand that I've been carrying ghosts for 20 years. What's 12 more? The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Then, we'll be in touch within the hour. Ghost One, thank you. The line went dead. Hazel stood in the sudden silence, her reflection staring back from the dark window. Behind her on a shelf sat the black challenge coin and a framed photo from the dedication ceremony Seth's family, smiling his name on the sign, a promise kept. Now that promise faced its hardest test. Could she guide someone else to make the shot she'd once made? Could she help save Seth's sister using the skills that had cost Seth his life? Her phone buzzed again, a text from Amber. "Everything okay? Saw some official vehicles heading toward the base." Hazel typed back, "I'll call you tomorrow. Something's come up. Anything I can help with? Not this time, but thank you." She grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Within 20 minutes, she was at Camp Pendleton's secure facility, where military personnel had set up equipment that looked more suitable for battlefield command than training consultation. Colonel Webb waited inside along with Master Chief Silas. Both looked grim. "You've been briefed," Webb asked. "Enough to know it's bad." "It's worse than you think. The hostage takers are broadcasting demands through back channels. They specifically mentioned Ghost One. They know who you are, where you are, and they're using Rachel Foster as bait." "To what end?" "We're not sure. Either they want you to attempt a rescue so they can capture or kill you, or they want to prove that the legendary Ghost One can't save everyone. Either way, it's personal." Hazel moved to the tactical display showing satellite imagery of the compound. The structure sat in a valley with limited approach angles, surrounded by urban development that created thermal distortion patterns. The hostages were being held in a central room with minimal external visibility. 2,400 yards, she muttered, studying the topology. Through urban heat distortion, wind patterns, variable, 12 to 18 miles per hour, shifting directions based on building placement. Atmospheric conditions. Temperature inversion layer at approximately 800 feet, creating unpredictable bullet trajectory above that altitude. Hazel pulled up ballistic calculators and began running scenarios. The mathematics were brutal at 2,400 yards, every minor variable compounded exponentially. Wind drift, temperature, humidity. Altitude, even the Earth's rotation, became factors that could mean the difference between a perfect shot and catastrophic failure. She worked through the night, running simulation after simulation. Master Chief Silas brought coffee at 0300 hours, sitting beside her, without speaking. Webb checked in periodically, but mostly left her alone, recognizing that this level of concentration required isolation. By 0600 hours, she'd founded a narrow window where atmospheric conditions might align. It would require patience, precision, and a shooter willing to wait for the perfect confluence of factors. The secure video link activated at 0700 hours. Derek Hayes' face appeared on screen, transmitting from a classified location somewhere in the Middle East. He looked older than 6 months ago, carrying the weight that came from operational deployment. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady despite obvious tension. "I need your help. I know, I've reviewed the scenario. It's possible, but barely. You'll need to wait for conditions to align perfectly. How long? Could be hours, could be 24 hours. You don't take the shot until every factor is optimal. Rachel Foster is Seth's sister. I remember you talking about him during training." "I know who she is." Derek's expression showed the weight he felt. "Ma'am, if I miss, you won't miss. Not if you do exactly what I taught you. Patience married to precision. You wait for the shot, you don't force it." Over the next 18 hours, Hazel guided Derek through the most complex shooting scenario of his career. She monitored atmospheric conditions and real-time calculated wind patterns from satellite data, analyzed thermal distortion effects, and waited for the perfect moment. The window opened at 0100 hours local time, 37 hours into the 48-hour deadline. Every factor aligned within acceptable parameters, wind stabilized at 14 miles per hour from a consistent direction, temperature inversion layer, lifted thermal distortion, minimized by nighttime cooling. "Derek," Hazel said calmly, watching the data streams, "you have your shot. Windage 23 inches, right elevation, 42 minutes of angle. Target will be visible for approximately 8 seconds when he moves to the window. You have one chance." "Understood, ma'am." Derek's breathing came through the audio link. 4 counts and 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. Box breathing, the technique she'd taught him. "Remember," Hazel said softly, "this isn't about speed, it's about certainty. You take this shot when you're absolutely certain, not when you think you're ready." "Yes, ma'am." Silence fell across the secure facility. Webb stood rigid, watching monitors. Silas gripped the edge of a table, his knuckles white. Hazel focused on the data tracking every variable in real time. Through Derek's scope camera feed, they watched the target window. Empty. Waiting. The seconds stretched like hours. Then movement. A figure appeared. The target, the hostage taker. The man who would die if Derek's calculations and Hazel's guidance were correct. Target visible, Derek whispered. Conditions optimal. Hazel confirmed. Your call. 2 seconds. 3, 4. The rifle fired. Through the scope camera, they watched the bullets impact 2,400 yards away, traveling for nearly 3 seconds through complex atmospheric conditions, carrying the hopes of 12 hostages and the weight of Seth Foster's memory. The target dropped. Clean hit. Center mass. Impossible shot made real through patient's precision and a teacher's guidance combined with a student's trust. Target down. Derek reported, his voice shaking slightly. Hostage rescue team moving in. All hostages accounted for and alive. The secure facility erupted in controlled celebration. Webb allowed himself a tight smile. Silas released his grip on the table. Hazel sat back in her chair, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Rachel Foster would live. Seth's sister would come home. The promise was kept one more time. Ma'am, Derek's voice came through the audio link. Thank you for teaching me patience, for being there when I needed you. You made the shot, Derek. I just helped you see it was possible. That's what teachers do. They help us see what we can't see ourselves. After the link closed and the equipment powered down, Hazel walked outside into the California morning. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The Seth Foster Memorial Range lay quiet in the early light, waiting for another day of teaching warriors to come home. Her phone buzzed, the encrypted number again. Parker, Ghost 1, mission successful. All hostages recovered safely. Rachel Foster is en route to medical evaluation and debriefing. The distorted voice paused. We may need to call on you again. This situation revealed gaps in our capabilities that only you can fill. I'm not deploying, Hazel said firmly, but I'll consult, I'll teach, I'll help guide the next generation to make shots I used to make. That's what I can offer. That may be enough. Stand by for future contact. The line went dead again. Hazel pocketed her phone and looked out at the range, at the sign bearing Seth's name, at the place where she'd built meaning from loss. 3 days later, an unmarked package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a challenge coin, not black like hers, but silver, with an inscription, Ghost 1. The legend who teaches legends. Thank you for bringing us home. The team. 12 signatures were engraved on the back. 12 people who'd survived because Hazel Parker had been willing to pick up her skills one more time, to guide a shot she couldn't take herself, to honor a promise that refused to stay buried. She placed it on her shelf beside the black coin, the framed photo, and the other artifacts of a life lived in service and sacrifice. Outside California continued its existence indifferent to small dramas of survival and redemption. But Hazel knew the truth that the encrypted caller had hinted at. This wasn't the end. Ghost 1 might be retired, might be teaching rather than operating, but legends never truly rest. They simply wait, carrying their skills and their burdens, ready when the impossible needs to be proven possible one more time. Her phone sat on the counter, silent now, but pregnant with future possibilities. Somewhere in classified files, her name remained active in databases marked for situations requiring extreme precision. Somewhere, people were making lists of problems that couldn't be solved conventionally, and her name appeared beside them. She'd made her choice to walk away from killing, but in walking away she'd found something else, the ability to teach others to kill more wisely, to guide shots she couldn't take, to multiply her effectiveness by training dozens of operators who would carry forward her principles. That was worth the cost, worth the exposure, worth the memories that haunted her nights, and the faces that never faded. The mountains caught the afternoon light, glowing with that peculiar California gold that had drawn Seth Foster's imagination. Somewhere out there, Rachel Foster was reuniting with her family, alive because of skills learned and principles taught. Somewhere, Derek Hayes and his team were debriefing, processing what they had accomplished, understanding more deeply the lessons Hazel had tried to teach. And here in a small apartment on the edge of Camp Pendleton, Ghost 1 stood at her window and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The ghosts would always be there. The weight would never fully lift. But the balance had shifted slightly. 12 more lives, saved one more promise, kept one more reason to believe that meaning could be built from even the darkest materials. Her phone buzzed one final time. A text from Rachel Foster, just released from medical evaluation. "Thank you. My brother would be proud of you. I am too." Hazel typed back simply, "He made it possible. I just tried to be worthy of his sacrifice." "You are, more than you know." She set down the phone and looked at the challenge coins on her shelf, black and silver, death and life, past and present existing side by side. Both were true. Both were her. And tomorrow she would return to the range bearing Seth's name and teach another group of candidates to shoot straight and think clearly, to value life, while preparing to take it, to understand that true strength came not from capability, but from the wisdom to apply it justly. That was the real victory. Not the impossible shot guided from thousands of miles away. Not the legend exposed and transformed into teaching, but the simple daily choice to make meaning from loss, to build light from darkness, to insist that warriors could learn to come home, not just physically, but whole. The California sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Inside her apartment, Hazel Parker Sargent, Major Ghost 1, carrier of 2,847 deaths and guardian of countless lives saved, allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the balance would eventually tip toward light. And in that hope and that stubborn insistence that redemption was possible even for those who carried the weight of necessary killing, Ghost 1 found the only peace available to those who'd served as she had. It was enough. It had to be. Tomorrow would bring new candidates, new challenges, new opportunities to teach and guide and hope. But tonight, for just a few hours, she could rest in the knowledge that Seth's dream lived on, that his sacrifice meant something, that the impossible could still be proven possible when patience married precision, and when legends learned to teach rather than simply perform. The challenge coins caught the last light, black and silver gleaming side by side. Two sides of the same truth. Two versions of the same person, both necessary, both real, both worthy of the name Ghost 1.